Hey friends, I'm Christy, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall, even when it makes waves. I do want to mention that founder spots are filling up for the Thrive Collective. That is a membership that I have that is coaching and empowerment, especially if you're looking to start something new, like write a book or start a podcast or figure out what your second half of life is going to look like if you explore a passion project alongside your career. And group discussions through supporting each other in the group. And we combine those conversations with movement, yoga, Pilates, breathwork, meditation. It is a place for both your logical brain to explore what it might look like to try something new, and a place for your nervous system to say, take a breath. You've got this. And if you have been watching the last couple of episodes, then you might see that I am recording in a friend's space, and it is a space that is filled with so much love and positive energy, and everything in here has meaning and a positive saying on it. And that's really why I wanted to split up my conversation with Nicole Beaudin into two parts, is because we really dig into this idea that you can have this incredible corporate career, whether it's corporate retail or another type of industry, and then find alternative ways of healing that might be, dare I say, frowned upon or just less common, or people think they're really woo. And it's really just tapping into a different type of spirituality. We are all made up of energy, and there is no denying, however it hits you, that there is energy transfer between us. If someone comes in and they're having a bad day and they're talking negatively, it's probably going to put you in a bad mood. It's really hard to stay positive when someone around you is just really toxic. And on the flip side, if you're around someone who's happy all the time, do you feel better when you're around them? That's the power of energy. And things like Reiki or sound healing, or even the way that I teach yoga through a very somatic experience, so feeling into your body, those are ways of moving energy, being more present with your energy, and not staying up in your head all the time. We can get into our body and really witness what we are feeling and let our intuition be our guide. So this is the second half of the conversation with Nicole. Nicole is a spiritual coach, and I'm excited to dig more into the work that she does in the present day, how she coaches. We talk about unlocking subconscious beliefs and really coming from a place of healing from things that you've had trapped in your psyche for a really long time. One of the things that I wanted to mention too about Nicole and why I think our meeting was so powerful, I'm always pleased when I attract like-minded women into my life, because for me, being raised in the church and realizing that my spirituality looked a lot different than my upbringing, it's nice to have women who you meet, or men, who give you permission to feel that way. Our friend Sabrina, who has also been on the podcast, introduced Nicole and I via email or LinkedIn and said, hey, I think the two of you should meet. You're both doing similar work. So we had a call, and then we decided that she would be on the podcast. On the podcast recording, and you'll see it today, she talks about bison, and she held up a little carving of a bison. And you probably won't even notice it in the video, but I started welling up and I got really emotional, because when you turn down the road to go to my house, there is a house that has this huge stone embedded in the wall of the front of the house, and it looks almost identical to the bison that Nicole holds up. And I was overwhelmed, just in awe of the synchronicity of it, because her message and all of the wisdom I've gained from being her friend has been tremendous. And her intuition is spot on so many things. And to have this nod from the universe that we were meant to be friends and meant to meet. I thanked Sabrina for introducing us, and I shared with Nicole a photo of that house that matches the little bison that she has on her desk. And it's these types of synchronicities that help affirm that you're on the right path. If you are doubting something that you're doing, if you're unsure of the path ahead, just start to look for these little signs. I heard in recovery, it's not odd, it's God. When you start to notice things like angel numbers or other signs that you see repeatedly, to me, that is the universe's affirmation that you are on the right path. I have been on such a roller coaster for this past year that it's really nice for me to have these conversations and meet people to walk alongside in life. We need support. We need connection. That's why I created the Thrive Collective. You may be part of a community, a business organization, a church community, whatever that looks like. I hope that you have some amazing connection in your life and that you have the support that you need. It is how we're wired as humans, is to connect. So I invite you to listen to the second half of my conversation with Nicole Beaudin, and let's tune in. I'm glad you brought up shadow work, shadow beliefs. I want to get into that a little bit, and this might kind of tie into my next question. But when you first start working with a client, you've talked about you have to unlock these subconscious beliefs. We aren't aware of them.
Yes.
So when you first start working with somebody, what are some of the first things that you do to help them unlock those?
The method that I'm trained in is a teaching method. So it is a step-by-step program that's sort of going back to the archaeological dig analogy. You start at the top. What is the vision? What pre-vision, I usually ask them, especially if they're in a leadership position, what are the things that you hate? Like, get them to air the ugly. What do you hate about your life right now? What feels heavy? What bothers you? So you can really have like a clear understanding of what's going on. And then you ask them to articulate their vision, and not just like, oh, here's my life. What is the vision for the pie slices of your life? Family, adventure, work, finance, health. There are many. You can choose all of them. And then after that, we teach the power of what subconscious beliefs. Okay, this is how subconscious beliefs work. And and then we ask specific prompts to access the subconscious belief that is ready to shift now. And then we do persona work. One great question on denied personas is, who triggers you most right now? The person triggering you most right now is a mirror to you of what's meant to be integrated. So how can you integrate that into your life? Then self-confidence. What shiny parts of yourself have you locked away? Who do you admire? And then you admiring them is showing you that that's ready in you to shine brighter. And so in the teaching, we talk through the psychology and how it lives in your subconscious and how it gets embedded in your subconscious. My best example of this, when I had first started to become a certified coach and was working on building my first website, I procrastinated on building my first website. I just stared. I stared at Shopify like a fool. And then we got into the session. So to become a certified coach in Nancy Levin's method, you have to go through the method multiple times, and then you have to coach practice on it. And we got to a part called underlying commitment. So when you form a subconscious belief as a child that says, we'll use the bossy example we'll thread through. It's not safe for me to be so bossy. You then form a commitment to yourself that says, and it's all about survival, right? This is just our nervous system and our ego trying to keep us safe from lions, right? So if you've decided being bossy isn't safe, you then form a commitment to yourself that says, I will not, something, it's always super simple because it's the mind of a 7 or an 8-year-old, right? I will not be bossy. When it comes time to do something like get promoted to the boss, own your own business where you have to tell people what to do, you will self-sabotage every single time. My instance, for the website, it was often bullied or teased, or I would get looks from my mom when I shined too brightly in my greatness when I was a little kid. So I had a subconscious belief that it was not safe for me to be better than those around me. And I made a commitment to not shine so brightly. So when it came time to launching my own website, I had to uproot that commitment. And it's a very simple exercise. Where do your actions not match your words? What is the belief? What is the story you tell yourself about that? Can you access the original memory? And the questions are soft. So it sort of leads you. It's not just this abrupt thing. It's kind of this like gradual unraveling and awareness. And then you rewrite the belief or the commitment. It is safe for me to shine brightly. In fact, it's imperative so that I allow others to access their greatness too. And so that's sort of how the work works. Did that answer your question?
Yes, a great overview of what you do and kind of the excavation because I think like I'm familiar with limiting beliefs and rewriting new beliefs, and that's even a practice I use with clients. But a lot of times it's hard to figure out those limiting beliefs because they are buried so deep, and especially having to go back that far. So I think going as in depth as you do in your coaching practice, it can help us get way beyond sort of those surface level things because we don't always recognize those patterns. I want to make sure people understand what all you do in your work because it is so needed out there. And it's like you said earlier, those of us who have come from the corporate world and now are exploring these different ways of doing things can inform and educate and help people heal that are quote unquote trapped in that space. So and it's not always a conscious thing either.
No.
Something typically happens. For me, it was sobriety. So I decided in 2018 to get sober, to quit drinking alcohol. I did not realize how much of my authentic personality that I was numbing out. And part of that was because I was doing a job that I was not creative enough for who I am. I think that that's when I really started to unlock my writing talents and gifts. And it's interesting because lately my work has been around not so I just finished my second manuscript and I don't have any formal education in writing. So it would be easy for me to say, "Oh, I'm not a writer because I've never been trained or educated in it. I don't have an MFA." But that's okay because I have a lot of people who enjoy my writing and people say, when's the second book coming out? And so I write in a way that brings me joy and that a lot of people find very readable, which is sometimes more important than having, fancy words and a really upscale vocabulary or whatever that looks like. But
Well, and that goes back to the story we tell ourselves, right? Those beliefs. If you would have let the belief that because you don't have an MFA, you're not a writer drive you, but you've always wanted to write a book, guess what? Writers are people who write. Like that's as
yes.
simple as it is. And if you write in a way that connects to others, then you definitely are a writer and your life experience is there as a guide. And so that is how the stories we tell ourselves to not do something or to hold ourselves back or to not commit to the promises to ourselves or how we numb and avoid. Those are all access points to where we have something in our subconscious that is trying to keep us safe, albeit misdirected. Right. And so I've used EMDR, which has powerfully helped me rewire my brain. I've used what is called this thing called Psych K. My chiropractor in New Jersey did it on me. It's a muscle-based technique where she can access so if I said something, she would use kinesiology, so your muscle memory, and she could access where I didn't believe what she said. So if she said, "Nicole, you believe you should have billions of dollars," my muscles would tell her what I really believed, even though I would say yes.
Wow.
And then there's a technique attached to it that helps you shift the subconscious beliefs. So there's all sorts of ways, and body-based, you teach yoga. Body-based is a great way to shift techniques. I've had times at the chiropractor or in yoga or in just simply walking and running where something shifted within me and I just sobbed. Like it finally released a block. And so all of these are ways that we can begin to create shifts within our life. The question that I always ask people, and I always ask myself too, because once you are a certified coach, it's like you're annoyingly a certified coach for yourself, is that when I see a pattern in my life that I can't change no matter how hard I try, that is a subconscious belief. And so that is then, who can I ask for help? Do I do some work on myself, some journaling, some body movement, or do I need to really phone an expert? And it all kind of works there. So that is how I would look at it.
We were talking about tapping before
Yes.
we hopped on. So I know that is one powerful tool. And how might someone use, so EFT, right, is what
Yes.
technically it's called. How
Yeah,
might someone
EFT
use
tapping.
tapping in that instance?
So let's say you know you want to be a coach who's easily found, and yet you never post video on any social and you don't go to networking events. You are quietly at home and you're horrible at SEO and you don't even use Claude or ChatGPT to help you with SEO. You could say what you would ask yourself, okay, what is underneath this? Say I want to make impact. I say I want to change the world, and yet I'm hiding. You have to be really honest with your actions, right? And then if you're hiding, okay, what's underneath that? I fear visibility. What if someone misinterprets me? What if I say something wrong? What if I make a mistake? There are tapping scripts everywhere. People have blogs about this. It's easy to find. Or you can create your own like I have, but there is sort of a templatized way it goes. You start with the negative.
Mm.
I understand it's not safe for this, da, da, da. And then through the tapping script, you kind of weave it into safety for visibility. So you could start with, I recognize for thousands of years it hasn't been safe for women to be seen in their power. It's in my genetics. I know visibility is scary for me, and you're just tapping along with it. And then you shift it to, but that story isn't relevant anymore. It's safe for me to be visible, and this is how I'm going to start. And so by tapping it's like all these points on your body.
Mhm.
And again, there's a lot of YouTube videos. If people are curious to look into this, just Google EFT tapping. Even if visibility is a thing for someone that watches this, EFT tapping for visibility, you will find scripts, you will find YouTube videos. There's so much free, beautiful content on this. I personally find it works better if I do it like 30 days in a row, and you'll feel it. The best EFT tappers will ask you to note how the belief feels in your body first. So if visibility is the thing, you say, I'm really excited to be easily visible to everyone. If you're really present, you'll feel like a tension somewhere in your body. And so then you'll go through the tapping script and you'll be able to see that that tension is less, ideally. And so you do that tapping script. It's almost like EMDR. It's like, how much does that resonate with you now? And what you want is that to not have any tension in your body anymore.
Yeah. I think we get so keyed up and we stay in this fight or flight system all the time, the state of being that we just, any practice, whether it's tapping, somatic experiencing, anything that can bring us down and make us aware of what's happening in our body is so important. And when you brought up yoga earlier, like I tend to teach really slow, methodical yoga. And for some people who want a power class, I am not their teacher. But if you want to get into Warrior Two, and I'm describing these energetic ways, you can reach front to back and notice what's happening in the back leg and all of these things. Like that's how I was taught, which is why I love my teacher so much. And that's how I teach others. One of the things we've talked about is there are amazing tools out there. I think one thing to point out for listeners is that a tool that works for someone is not necessarily going to work for you. I think there has to be this entire toolbox that you use. And once you find what you like, maybe you have 5 or 6 different tools. It's like you paint a house, you're not going to, you have one, you might have a sprayer and then you have a brush that you go in and do the cut in work. So one tool is not a full toolbox make. And the other thing is that comes to mind for me is like habituation. We start to use something and then we feel like it loses its power over time. So, can you speak to how maybe you work through that or how you work with clients on that?
So, first, I feel compelled to say that if anyone has a coach that demands that they do a thing, they should not work with that coach anymore, because back to everything is so individual. with a lot of my leadership clients that are in this constant fight or flight, one of the best ways to rock the boat is to regulate your nervous system, because we make better choices from a regulated nervous system. I would argue, the conspiracy theorist in me argues that capitalist society doesn't want us regulated. And coming from the corporate retail space, I feel like I can say that with like a level of accuracy because you know the marketing and I know the merchandising and buying behind it. And we buy more when we're dysregulated. So, but I will give options. This is what works for me. This is what has worked for other clients. This is what you can try. And what I will say to them is try it and get present with it. And then if it doesn't work, then try something else. As a great example, I had a client, she's super awesome. She's an archaeologist, has been a part of changing history in an archaeological dig. And she herself said to me, Nicole, I want to meditate more. And she's yoga trained as well. I tend to attract high achieving type A people pleasing perfectionists because that is who I am or was recovering. And she said to me, Nicole, I want to spend more time with my son in the morning and my husband, but I really want to meditate before I leave for work. And then we got on our next call and I asked her, there's always an accountability piece. The best coaches, as you know, hold people accountable, right? And she looked at me and she said, I failed. She said, I tried to meditate, but I couldn't do it. And I asked her what got in the way. And she said, I just really wanted to be present with my son. I couldn't meditate before I left the house. And so then I asked another question. Well, what could you do instead? And she sat with it for a second. Maybe when I get to the office, I can close my door for 5 minutes and meditate there. And so that's what she started doing. So getting really curious and being really present with what works for you and what doesn't. Another great example, when I was in a really dark place in New York City about this decade ago time, I read The Power of Gratitude Lists and I started having a gratitude list. Now I just infuse gratitude in every moment of my day as often as possible. In my head, oh, thank you, bird, for showing me that sign. Oh, beautiful tree, very cup of coffee. You're so amazing. And so I don't write it anymore, but there is a power that happens when you write something down. And so when I was recently sort of in the depths of like uprooting an old wound, I went back to my gratitude list. And so every day now I write 10 things I am grateful for and 5 things I'm grateful for that haven't happened yet, but in present tense. And so it gets you back into it. I didn't realize that's what I needed, but I thought, let me just try again to do this thing that had worked for me in the past that I have gone away from. And so I did that. I guess what I would suggest, and I'm curious to know what you would suggest too, I would suggest people writing down the things that make them feel lighter. This is what I talk about in my Substack, This Way to Lightness. What things bring you joy? What makes you feel lighter? Okay, write down that list and have that list ready. And then, okay, as your coach, I'm going to give you some scientifically proven things, right? Like this is why meditating works. This is why walking outside works. This is why time with animals works. So you can see if you want to test and learn with those. And then you just have to try and see what grounds you and makes you present with yourself. And sometimes you have to try for a couple weeks before you realize, oh, that's not for me. And you have to look at your own schedule. One of my former clients was a busy mom who was taking over her family business and she had no time. And so she did an affirmation before she got out of bed in the morning. And that was the ritual that she could do. And that's okay. People think you need to meditate for 7 hours in order to be regulated or spiritually in tune, but regulation happens in small moments over time. It's not I'm going on a retreat for 7 days and living in silence. That's right for some people, but it doesn't need to be so extreme.
Yes, I agree. I think just small moments throughout the day, anything you can carve time out for. My morning routine changes periodically, and especially if I am working my way through a book that has 365 entries in it. When I come to the end of the book, I don't necessarily start that book all over again, so I might look at for something new. So it might be that reading a passage is part of my morning routine, but what I'm actually reading changes over time. I've gone from like I love coffee. I need to thank my coffee and be grateful for my coffee because I am. I've tried switching to tea. I've tried different things and yeah, sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's not. And I have found that for me, meditating later in the day is better because I just feel like maybe I need that break intuitively later in the day. Then when I get up in the morning, I'm firing on all cylinders and I feel great. And I just want to sit in silence for a little bit and then start my day. Whereas it might be mid-afternoon when I am starting to swirl and feel tired and feel down and frustrated, then it's like, okay, that's the moment when if I pause and get still and get in my body, then I can do those things. And I'm big on breath work. And I think for people who feel like, oh, meditation has to look a certain way, that if they even take those 5 minutes to use a breath technique that can bring them back into their bodies, that can be as effective and as a form of meditation when you're tuned into that breath and you're focusing. And that's not to go off on a whole tangent, but with the 8 limbs of yoga, there is 3 components related to focus and meditation. And the asana, the poses that we know, were actually used historically to get all that energy out so that then you could sit and meditate. So it's like we use it as stretching, but really it's not, historically not what that was for. So anyway, without getting on that whole TED talk, then I will come back to the fact that breath work is a way to focus and concentrate. And maybe for someone who says, "Oh, I can't meditate," well, can you regulate your breath for 5 minutes? Maybe. So,
Even
all different
30
ways to
seconds,
get there.
if you're jumping from meeting to meeting in the corporate space, go to the bathroom, close the door, breathe for 30 seconds. You will regulate your nervous system. Ask for a hug. Hugs regulate your nervous system. Time with animals. There's so much that I think the overarching theme should be, does this make you more present with yourself? And can you feel that you can weather the storm of what is being thrown your way? And in life, that changes. There are some times in life where the storms aren't as stormy, horribly said. And then there are there are times where the seas are calm, right? And so you may need less. But then there are times where the seas get more tumultuous as you're kicking stuff up. And then you will need more tools in your toolkit, more community around you for support. You may need to pay for help and support. So it's just having that access to know what you need when you need it and giving yourself permission to do it.
Yes. I I think about in sticking with that metaphor, it's like I rocked the damn boat by leaving corporate, and that was why I started this podcast. And my mom said she was raised not to rock the boat, which is exactly why I was like, I'm rocking the damn boat. I'm
Yep.
doing this thing. I fell into the water and I was like drowning because nothing that I used before from a tool standpoint was necessarily working for me because menopause scientifically shown to change your brain chemistry. So estrogen goes along with it, dopamine and oxytocin and all of these things that they are physically studying, like physically changes your brain chemistry. That's caused me to look for different ways of regulating. Like you said, go back to gratitude lists, go back to things that maybe I haven't used in quite some time. The conditions can change, like you said. And for me, it was like, well, I made this choice consciously, but then I had no idea that the aftermath would feel so much different than, where I've been in the past. I'm so grateful that there are so many women like us and men too who I follow a lot of men on Substack who are talking about the same types of things
Yes.
that we used to call it a midlife crisis, and now it's like an awakening. I love when I see people refer to it as a midlife awakening because there's this idea that you can, enter the second half of your life or this new chapter for your life with a whole different awareness of your body, your intuition, all of these things. So I'm grateful for you and the work that you do. And speaking of that, I feel like we could go on for hours, but in the interest of our listeners' attention span, we'll start to close this conversation. But tell everyone specifically who you work with and where they can find you.
I work with people who were me, to be honest, who are successful on the outside, but really unhappy on the inside. They're high performers. They're type A. They are people pleasers. And whether they know it or not, they're likely empaths. So they are reading the room. They are feeling all the feelings and probably soaking up people's stuff. And so I guide them back to self-awareness. In that self-awareness, they have even greater emotional intelligence because they're not letting the room drive them. They are presencing themselves and then presencing the room, really understanding and getting out of their own way so that they can live and lead in alignment with their values and their dreams.
And your website is your name, NicoleBeaudin.com. I will be sure
Yes.
and link that in the
Thank
show
you.
notes. And your Substack newsletter is called what?
It's This Way to Lightness, and it is also, I am the author. Ideally, I'm looking for other authors sometimes to share their story of This Way to Lightness as well. But for now, I'm the sole author. It's all the tools and stories that help you live a lighter life.
That's incredible. Well, Nicole, it's been amazing having you on this show. I always like to close the conversation by asking my guests who their boat rocking role model is.
So I actually have three. I've been thinking about this since you let me know this question. The first one is my great, 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 great. Her name was Marguerite Roy. And the reason I found her is because she was on a family tree and she had the same birthday as me, December 8th, but in like, I don't know, 1600 and something. And the records show her in France. And then they show her in Canada, and it shows her with family and then without families. The history of France at that time was that the Pope was killing everyone that wasn't Catholic. Think of The Three Musketeers, the movie. If you've ever watched it, it is one of my favorites. What I have deduced through the historical findings, she was likely given a choice by the king to either die or go to Canada because they had too many men in Canada and they needed women. She decided, Marguerite Roy, I don't know if Roy was really her last name. So ROI in French is king, right? And so they had these filles des rois that went from France to Canada, and they were meant to meet men and grow the Canadian population. The coolest part about the filles des rois, though, is it wasn't that the men just could choose the women. They actually had to date, and the women had the final choice. So I always think
Okay.
about this woman in the 1600s who is running from God knows what in France and decides to get on a boat without Instagram, without LinkedIn, without social media, without Google, without AI, to a land she has never been to and hopefully meet a man. So she helps me rock the boat. Matt's mom helps me rock the boat. I was raised to not ask for what I want or to quiet my wants. And Matt's mom started her own business after Matt's dad and her got divorced. She's one of the best wallpaper hangers in the Midwest. And she will say, Nicole, you need to go ask for that to get fixed. That is not okay. They did it wrong. And she will stand her ground and ask for it correctly. And I was raised that you do not do that. So that's number two. And number three, thank you for letting me have three and break the rules.
Of course, of course.
So this is a little bison, and I recently led a facilitation here in Cincinnati for a group of owners and leaders, and I called it Be the Bison. And the reason this is important is as an empath, leaning into discomfort is really uncomfortable. Like I feel it in my body. But if it's en route to my dreams, like having that courageous conversation, saying something hard to someone, doing something new and failing, but then learning faster and doing again. The things we don't do, the conversations we don't have stop us from succeeding in business and they lead to a heavier life, right? So the bison, as my business mentor taught me, when a storm comes, the bison gather together as a herd and they run into the storm instead of away from the storm, which means the storm moves by faster. So bison, in a sense, rock the boat by going into the storm instead of away from it. So as an empath, when I am afraid of doing that thing because it feels really uncomfortable in my system, if it is en route to my dreams, I will literally say in my head, Nicole, just be like the bison and go into the storm. And it always passes fast.
That is wise. And I love that. I was just leading a retreat a couple of weeks ago and there were bison on the property. And that means a lot to me because we were just in awe of their magnificence, and to know that they faced the storm head on is incredible. And all of your other role models. I love having brave women on the show because they are boat rocking role models for some of our listeners. You could just might be a few steps behind somebody and can learn from everyone that we have. So, Nicole, it's been a pleasure having you on, and
Thank
thank
you.
you everyone for listening.
Yes, it's been so wonderful. Thank you, Christy.
You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.